So there are a total of 32 pieces in this chessboard, combining black and white. So each player gets 16 pieces. 8 pawns, meaning the small, like those foot soldiers ones. 2 knights, basically the horses. 2 bishops, they have like a pointy side on their front. 2 rooks, and they're like elephants. Basically, they're like the fortress of the castle. 1 queen and 1 king. So, as you know what checkmate means, it means that wins a game, and draw means stalemate. In chess language, stalemate means it draws the game. So, basically, you get 5 points each. So, if a checkmate is 10 points, then a draw equals 5 points. So, as it says, checkmate often shortened to mate. So, in chess language, they shorten it every time, and they call it mate. Is a position in chess and other chess-like games in which a player's king is in check, meaning threatened with capture. What I mean by threatened with capture is that the king is in trouble, and basically the queen or any other piece is contacting the king in a particular direction. That is what check means. And there is no way to avoid the threat. So, like, you cannot capture the piece that is checking you, or you cannot block it. If a player is not checked but has no legal move means like it cannot move anywhere, it's stuck in one place because all the sides other are checked, then it is a draw and the game immediately ends in a draw. So basically you get 5 points. Usually what chess grandmasters and everyone else tries to do is basically if they cannot win a game, then they draw it. So yeah, checkmate and draw ends the game. I'll go to slide 3 now. So yeah, 2 players play chess, of course. During the game, 2 opponents take turns to move one of their pieces to a different square on the board. One player, white, has pieces of a light color, and the other player, black, has pieces of a dark color. So, white and black pieces. This goes into a little bit of history here. We haven't covered this last time, but this is like a little bit of history here. In chess, the player who moves first is referred to as white, and the player who moves second is referred to as black. Similarly, the pieces that each conducts are called respectively the white pieces and the black pieces. So if you want to specify which pieces are which, then you can just call them by their color. And now the advantage of white versus black pieces. Now this goes into history. So there has been a debate among chess players since at least 1846, around like, I don't know, 150 years ago, about whether playing first gives white a significant advantage. Statistical analysis, meaning data, shows that white scores between 52 and 56%. This is basically math. So in out of 100%, white scores 56 or 52%. That is more than 50%. So basically, white has more chance to win. With white's margin increasing as the standard of the play improves. Since it already says that 56% is already occupied by the color white, then always the margin goes up and the white piece gets even more advanced as it plays and plays. Unless the player who is playing just leaves the board and just runs. But that will never happen because it's chess. You cannot just do physical sports in chess. So now I'll just go to the explanation of chess pieces. So the chess piece, also known as a pawn, the black and a foot soldier type one. There are 8 of them in a board. So the pawns can move forward 1 square if that square is unoccupied. Unoccupied means that if there is nothing in the square. So if I can just show you a diagram about it. If I move this pawn to here, you cannot see it, but if I move it into this piece, then it's unoccupied. That means there is no other piece blocking its way. So I'll just go back to the slide where I was again. And I will go back. If it has not yet moved, the pawn has the option of moving 2 squares forward, provided both squares in front of the pawn are unoccupied. So basically, if the pawn hasn't moved, like I just did the diagram, the pawn is really small, but it can move from the backwards to the forwards within 2 squares, even though I just enlarged that a little bit. it can move from this point to the second square on the chessboard, from 1 to 2 if it's unoccupied. So now a pawn cannot move backward. Unlike other pieces that can always move backward and forward, a pawn is a piece that only goes in the front and center of the board. It only goes and goes until there is a way of making a new piece. We discussed that in like earlier class, where the pawn moves all the way over the board and then it can generate a new piece. They can capture an enemy piece on either two spaces next to the front of them. So basically that means that if the pawn is against another pawn diagonally, then it can take the piece and it can get a point. Points in chess are just how much the piece is valuable. So if there's a pawn that's diagonal to your opponent's pawn, then you can take it, or you can capture it in chess language as it's called. So now we'll go to knight and bishop. So each player starts with two knights, which are located between the rooks and the bishops. So if we go to the chessboard diagram located here, you can see that the horses are located both right next to and beside the rook and the bishop. For black, it is also the same. So now if you go back to this slide, then a knight can move one square along any rank or file and then at an angle. So what it means by that is that a knight can jump over pieces and it can move in a particular direction that no other piece can move in. So what that means is like it can go in an L shape. Since I'm in my phone, I cannot really like do much here, but I can show you what happens within it. It can move right to this square. Did you see how it moved? It moved in an L shape. It moved in a total L but a backwards L. And if it's over here, then it can also move to this, this square. Why is it enlarging anyways? It can move to this square. So it can move in an L shape to where the square is unoccupied, or even if there's a piece and it's unprotected, then it can go there and capture the piece. So I'll just retreat this back to its original spot, and we'll go back to the slide. So the knight's movement can also be viewed as an L or a 7 laid out in any horizontal or vertical angle. So as I just showed you, the knight goes from one side of the board to other side of the board by jumping pieces, and it goes in a backwards L. So now we'll go to bishop. Chess piece is known as bishop, and it looks like it has a little dot on the top of it. So chess piece for a bishop means each player begins with the game of two bishops, of course. And the bishop can move any number of vacant squares in any diagonal direction. Vacant squares means that it can move diagonally. If you can just see what can happen. This just got enlarged, I'm sorry. I'll just disenlarge it. So the bishop can move diagonally throughout the board, and it can stop at a vacant square. It can move from any side of the board, but it can stop really vacantly. So if it moves from one side of the board, then this bishop can move to the other side. Exactly like that. And if you go into it even more, then it can just come back to the square you were, or it can go backwards. It can go backwards or forwards. So the bishop, that is the bishop. Now we'll go for the queen. I mean the queen and the rook, even though this is switched, that was an editing error. So each player starts the game with two rooks, one on each of the corner squares of their own side of the board. So if you go and see it for black, since it's perfectly aligned, you can see that the rooks are exactly at the corner of the board. So also the white pieces have the same rooks. Each player starts the game with two rooks and they're on the corner. And the rook moves horizontally or vertically through any number of occupied squares. So it can move any amount of squares in a straight, back, left, or right direction. So if I can just show that. So imagine this is the rook. The rook over here, since these are the squares, you can imagine this is chessboard. It can move left, it can move right, it can move up, it can move down, even though the rook is still here. It can move up and it can move down. So that was the rook. It cannot move any more squares since it is not a bishop or a knight. So now we'll go to the queen, even though this is not the queen, but it's still a piece, and that was just an editing error. So the queen is the most powerful piece in the game of chess. Truly, the king is supposed to be the most powerful piece since it is the king, as we know. But the queen can move like a rook and bishop combined. So basically, it can move like straight, up and down, left to right, and like a bishop. It can move diagonal, vertical, horizontal, and basically all the directions except a knight. So a queen can move exactly front. Oopsies. It can move front, back, diagonal, or the other diagonal, but it cannot move like a knight. So now the king, of course. The king is the most important piece in the game of chess. It is the important, but it's not the most effective. The object of the game is to threaten the opponent in the opponent's king in such a way that escape is not possible. So also that is the name of the game. You can say checkmate. If a player's king is threatened with capture, it is said to be in check, and the player must remove the threat of capture on the next move. So if the threat of capture means that if a piece is aiming directly at the king at a really straight or diagonal angle, it's in check. But if the king has a defender on its side, even if the opponent checks the king, it can block by its defense. So that avoids checkmate. Now, for other instances, if the king is in check by some other piece, then it has two options. One, block, and the second one, it can go to the other side of the board. It can go only one square at a time. It can go to the other side of the board, but anywhere. So if there is a check to the king, then it can move out the way if necessary. So now can you open the forum to the questions? Hello? Now can you open the forum to the questions?
Yes, Shaunak. Yes, sure. Okay. So we have a question from Shlok. Shlok, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Shlok?
Yes, my question, can you go back to seventh slide? Like,
sure, I'll just go back to where I was. So which one are you seeing? The seventh slide, right? Seventh slide. So this one.
that's the one that you said is a queen. That's a king.
Yeah, I explained later in the video that was an editing error. We switched it out instead of putting it back together. So yeah, that was a mistake.
Okay.
Okay. So next question we have from Vedant. Vedant, yeah. Please go ahead. Vedant, yeah.
My question was that the king, can it move without having it checked? And then if all your coins are done, you don't, all your pawns and knights and rooks, they're all gone, and you only have your king left, and you have nothing to play with except your king, and your king doesn't have a checkmate. Can you play with the king?
I mean, if both of the kings are only they have kings and no other pieces, then it's a draw because you cannot win checkmate over a king. But if one opponent only has a king and the other opponent has maybe a king and queen, then it might be able to be checkmate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question we have from Prathamesh. Prathamesh?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. My question is like if a king is check, if a king has a check, can it like kill the opponent that which is checking it?
So if the king is in check, but if the piece who is checking the king is like directly next to the king, or if it's directly beside or anywhere close to the king within its 1 meter reach or its 1 square reach, then yes, it can capture it and it can stop the check.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
No problem.
Okay, next question we have from Gobind. Gobind? Yeah, can you unmute yourself?
I don't have a question,
Okay, you raised your hand. That's why we asked you.
but
Okay.
accidentally I raised my hand.
Okay, no problem. Then we have from Mishita. Mishita?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, I
Mishita.
Okay, so my question is like in the game board there's the queen. So can the queen can go all directions. So can the queen go horizontal too?
Yes, it can. It is a combination of both the rook and the bishop,
Okay. Thank you.
but it's not a combination of the knight. No problem.
Okay, next question we have from Rushika. Rushika?
It was a mistake.
Okay, no problem. And now we have from Riddhi Sharath. Riddhi Sharath, yeah, please go ahead.
So like, can the king like switch places?
Yes, that's called castling. So as we discussed in the earlier class, if the king is open to all squares in one side of the board, then it can castle from the other side if there is no piece blocking its way.
Okay, thank you.
So like this, basically you're talking about it. And the rook can go. That's a castle.
So like, I also have another question about it.
Sure.
So like, when do we like switch the king?
So basically, the switching or castling is best when the king is under attack. Like if it needs
Okay.
defense, that's the best move.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, Riddhi. Thank you. Then we have from Vishakha. Vishakha?
Say your question. How do you set up the chessboard?
That's a hard thing to do right now since I'm on mobile. But can you see the black pieces?
Yeah.
So the black pieces are aligned perfectly. So you can just do the mirror version of that to the white pieces, and that makes a full chessboard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have from Soumya. Soumya? Can you unmute yourself, Soumya?
Okay, so my question is that why is the king so important, but not the queen and the king?
I mean, both of them are important, but like the king is most important since it's a king. Like it's the basically the guardian of all the other pieces. But the queen, since it's the other form of the king, like it's the faster in like agile form, it can go anywhere to the board. But the king is like, it's like an old man, I want to say. It just moves one square at a time. Hello?
Okay, Soumya, are you good? Okay, I think she's good.
Okay.
Mihika, please unmute yourself, Mihika.
Yes,
Yeah, please go
Mother.
ahead. Yeah, please go ahead, Mihika.
Can the queen jump over pieces?
No, that's only done by the knight. But the queen can just stays in if the piece is blocked. It cannot jump over.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vedant.
Okay, so my question is that there's like the pawn is at its home place, and a piece from the other team is all the way across the board, and the pawn can't hit it from across, but the pawn is still at his home. So if he can hit that piece backwards across with at his home.
I mean, I get that, but it's just that since I'm on this device, I cannot really flip it back. Just try to see what the black pieces do. They're all at the correct side. So yeah, basically that's the home rule.
So I can't hit it backwards at my home place.
It can go backwards, but since this is like a device, it has to, sometimes it switches around. That's the error within these devices. All devices have this error.
Thank you.
But in a real chessboard, it's really 3D, so there should be no problem with flipping and all that.
Okay, next question we have from Ria.
Oh yes, I have a question. So can you repeat how you do checkmate again? And I have another question for the last as well.
So yeah, I'll just do the checkmate first. So basically, the checkmate is when the king has nowhere to move and one piece is directly checking the piece. So how can I show it over here?
What do you mean by checking the piece?
Checking the piece means direct contact by another opponent's piece. So like if the black king is in the home row and the white bishop is diagonally pointing towards the king, that is check. But if the white bishop is pointing towards the king, but the king has nowhere to move and it's trapped and it cannot block, then it's checkmate.
Johnny? Oh, sorry, my little brother was doing. So can you repeat what you said? Because my little brother is fighting and he wants to close them.
Oh, no problem. So yeah, checkmate is when the opponent's piece is within direct contact of the king. And so as you can see the bishop over here, if you just try to visualize a little bit, if the bishop is pointing towards the king with to not block any move of his, then it's checkmate. But if it can block and if it can run, then it's not. It just check. Does that answer your question?
Ria, please unmute yourself.
Another question, how does the king move?
The king moves at one square per move. So basically, if the king is in one spot, then it can move left, right, up, or down, but only one square at a time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Shaunak, there are no more questions, Shaunak, for this session.
Thank you very much, everyone.